Hey guys, in this video, I'm going to talk about how to dial in your compression settings for kick and snare. So here's the track I'm going to use to demonstrate. And for the sake of this video, I'm just going to solo at the drums, and I've muted the kick and snare samples that I've added. So here's what the drums sound like. And I've also grouped the kick and the snare together for this video because I essentially approach them the same from a compression standpoint, but there are multiple layers to compression that's used in a full rock drum mix. So we'll dive in and cover all of that. And by the way, I've got a free mixing cheat sheet you can download, and it's got the go-to compression settings for every track in your mix, including kick and snare, and also go-to starting points for EQ for every track in your mix. So don't worry about taking notes or remembering this stuff. I've got you covered there. You can download it for free at mixcheatsheet.com, or there's a link down in the description below. So let's start with how to compress the close mics on the drum kit. And the main thing you want to remember here is slow attack, fast release. All right, and that slow attack is really the crucial part because you want to allow enough time for that initial hit of the transient to essentially get through the compressor before it fully kicks in and reduces the level, which is going to have the effect of actually emphasizing the transient of the hit. And that's what gives us the extra punch and that attack that we're used to hearing on a modern rock drum mix. So let me show you what I mean here. So let's focus on the snare first. So I'm using this SSL channel plugin for my compression. This is what I use on all of my drum tracks on every mix. I love the way it sounds, and it's got really simple controls, pretty much just 3 or 4 controls to dial in the compressor. And it doesn't give you like time options for attack and release. It's just either fast or slow. And then we have the release knob here, which is set the fastest it can go, 100 milliseconds. So with this bypass button on, this is no compression. Now let's hear it with compression. So you can hear right away we have a sharper attack, and that front end punch is just emphasized. And by the way, this is a 3-to-1 ratio that I'm using. 3-to-1, 4-to-1 usually works fine for drums. And we've got this attack button set to the slow setting. And just to let you hear what it sounds like if this attack was too fast. So with the faster attack, it's really squashing it a lot more because it has to do a lot more gain reduction because it's starting a lot sooner. It's not allowing that initial transient to get through. And maybe a cool way to let you visualize this is just actually process a waveform. Okay, so we've just got a block of white noise here. Now, let me show you what happens if we go ahead and process this with compression. So let's just copy the exact same settings over. And as you can see, this is just a block of audio. There's no transients here. But if we go ahead and process this, and we can see visually on the waveform that now we have some dynamics. So what has happened here is the signal has been allowed through initially as the compressor starts kicking in and turning down the signal, and it takes a certain amount of time for that signal to be reduced as much as we want, right? And so that's why we have this gradual slope here, and we've now got the front end of the signal enhanced or kind of turned up. And the reason it's turned up is because there's makeup gain in this compressor, right? So the signal's getting turned down, and then the plugin is automatically turning it back up to compensate for the amount of volume reduction that's happened. So essentially, without the makeup gain, we would have ended up something like that, right? But because we've got the makeup gain, the signal is brought back up overall, and now we've got the effect of having turned up the initial attack of the sound. Now let's visualize the same thing on an actual snare track as well. So let's paste this over here, and let's pull up the audio suite version again. Okay, so here's the original audio. Now if we process it with the compression, boom, you can see just flipping back and forth. We've turned up, we've emphasized that transient. Now, what about the fast release? Well, a couple of reasons for that. Number one, you want the compressor to fully let go before the next drum hit, right? Because you don't want the compressor to have turned down the gain a certain amount and then it's still kind of releasing and returning the signal back to original level. You don't want it somewhere in the middle there before the next hit comes, or the next hit is not going to be full strength, full volume, right? You're not going to get the same effect. And the other part is that you actually want the compressor to return the signal back very quickly because it's going to give you the sustain again. And I can demonstrate this for you. So let's go back to the course. Now, again, listen to the compression settings that I've got dialed in. Oops, let me get the gate back on. And I'll mute my reverbs just to really emphasize what I'm talking about here. Okay, so if I make this release a lot slower, listen to the ring out on the snare. Not much. Faster release, we get the sustain and the ring of the snare back. And that might seem like a small detail, but in the context of a mix, it's actually really important. And the more we compress as we go on, which I'm going to show you, the more that ring is going to be important. That's what gives it a tone and character in the mix. And I'll show you what this sounds like on the kick drum as well. So again, we've got the exact same settings, 3-to-1 ratio, slow attack, fast release. Here's no compression, with compression. And again, it has the effect of actually making it sound like he's hitting the drum harder, which is exactly what we want. Now, I really like this SSL channel plugin because number one, it's very simple and fast to dial in the compressor settings. There's very minimal controls. I'm not distracted by all this visual stuff and extra complexity with it. And it also just has a great sound baked in, you know, whatever the actual attack time is in there. It sounds good on drums, especially on kick and snare. But just to further drive this home, I'll show you how to dial this in on any compressor here. So let me bypass the compression on the SSL channel, and I'll bring up this stock Avid compressor here. So again, we've got a 3-to-1 ratio here. Now let's start compressing. Now we want to slow down the attack. Release around 80, 100, it should be fine. Okay, there's the gain reduction. Now everything's quiet here, right? It doesn't have the auto makeup gain, so let's turn that up. Sounds like it's almost squashing a little too much there. So let's slow this down, somewhere between 30 and 40 milliseconds, usually pretty good for drums. So there you go. We've achieved a very similar sound, a very similar effect. I just find this way more cumbersome and difficult to dial in compared to an analog model plugin like the SSL channel. So that's step one, compressing the close mics. And this is not something that changes from song to song, all right? I don't mess around with different compressor plugins or different compression settings on my kick and snare from track to track when I'm mixing. A drum hit is a drum hit, right? You don't need to try different settings on every mix. This is in my template. It's the same all the time, all right? But, you know, this clearly isn't enough compression to give us that modern, explosive, super punchy drum sound. So let's go up a layer now to the drum bus. And I like to do just a couple more dB of gain reduction on the drum kit as a whole, using essentially the same settings. So here's my drum bus compressor. It's the SSL bus compressor this time. But you can see we've still got attack, slowest it can go, 30 milliseconds. Fastest release time, same release time as the channel, and it's lower ratio this time, 2-to-1. So I'm not trying to be really aggressive here. I just want to add a little bit of extra punch and snap to the front end of the drums. So it's bypassed now. I'll A/B it one more time for you. So not doing much. I like to only do a couple dB here just to level off the hits a little bit, make it a little more consistent, and it does add a little bit more front end attack to the drums there, but I want to keep this drum bus sounding pretty natural. So it's more controlled and glued together now, but we still don't have that really explosive, punchy energy, and that's where parallel compression comes in. So I've got a second drum bus here, which I call Crush, and as the name implies, I'm really going to crush this channel with compression. So it's got all the drums going to it. Now again, same bus compressor here, the SSL bus compressor, same attack and release, so still slowest attack, 30, 100 millisecond release, but this time we're using a 10-to-1 ratio, so we really want to start getting that pumpy, aggressive compression. So check out how this sounds. kind of pumpy and unnatural, but we're really getting a lot of that front end attack. Let me dial this in from scratch just so you can really hear what I'm listening for, and I'll solo just the kick and snare into it. And I'm trying to find a sweet spot, and I find it easier to just hear this on the snare itself. So check this out. So as we start getting more gain reduction, we start getting that front end attack, but at a certain point, it actually starts to kind of choke out the tone and makes it sound kind of bad. So listen to this. So to my ears, that's too much. It's a little too slammed and choked out. So if we back that off, we're going to find a sweet spot where we get a lot of that front end attack from the compression, but we still have some tone to the drum and it still sounds, somewhat okay. So right here, it's not enough. Here, it's too much. So right around there, we've got the smack, we've got the attack, but we still have some tone. It still sounds somewhat natural. And let's add the kick back in. And the whole kit. And now we have that character that we're used to hearing on modern rock records, right? That really snappy, punchy front end attack. And then from there, it's just a matter of mixing that back in with your regular drum bus. And just to demonstrate this again, I'll show you how to dial in this compression on just a stock compressor plugin. So let's pull this up. Let's go 10:1 ratio. Let's slow down the attack a bit. All right. So that's how you would dial this in with any other compressor. And that completes the stack of compression that gives me that punchy mainstream drum sound that we all want to hear. And I want to emphasize, this does not change. All right, this compression approach is baked into my mixing template. So I import this template on pretty much every track that I mix. And I don't experiment with different compression settings. Like a drum is a drum hit is a drum hit. Transients are pretty much all the same drum to drum. You don't need to experiment with different compression settings, okay? This is what gives you this sound. And this approach also will work for electronic drum sounds, EDM type stuff. If you're trying to enhance the punch and the attack and the smack and really get it popping and exploding out of the speakers, this is how you do it with compression. All right, hope that helps, guys. I'm just getting started with this Magic Compression Settings video series, so if you want to see more of these, let me know in the comments below and let me know which instruments you want me to tackle. And in the meantime, I've got a whole series of Magic EQ frequency videos already done for you, and you can check those out right over here.